so much. Teja, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. Wow, I love it when the MCs set the stage like that and give you such a springboard. I wish I'd prepared something now after all of that. So thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. So lovely to be here, back in Romania, back in this wonderful city, and back at this wonderful conference. I have spoken here once upon a time before. Realize it's 8 long years ago when I was but a boy when I was here last. So I'm very happy to be back here amongst you at this delightful event. Since we're talking about numbers, it's about 30 years since JavaScript sprung onto the scene. It was 30 years at the end of last year that it had its anniversary, and since I've got 30 minutes, it felt like there's some lovely symmetry there. There's a lovely opportunity for me to tee up the day, perhaps, tee up the conference with a little bit of a retrospective. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look back a little bit, and hopefully looking back will give us a chance to consider what's forward. So here's the plan for the next half hour. We're going to have a bit of history. What we're going to do is we're going to reflect a little bit about where JavaScript came from and some of the milestones we've been through along the way. Along the way, I may confess one or two things, because this is the circle of trust. I believe in you. I feel like this is a safe space, and I can do that. From those confessions, maybe I'll consider some of the things that I've done along the way. Hopefully, there'll be things maybe we can learn. And then after that, there'll be loads of great talks at this event, which we can all enjoy and learn from. At some point, there'll be a party. After the event is done, we'll be able to take all of the things away and hopefully apply one or two of the learnings to our work and the way that we conduct our business. And then further down the line, there's the heat death of the universe. Now, you'll be happy to hear that this is the abridged version. I haven't shown everything on here. And also, critically, this is not to scale. So that should hopefully give you a tiny bit of comfort. As Tejas kindly said earlier on, my name's Phil Hawksworth. My pronouns are he, him, and I've done a number of jobs in the web. I've been building things for the web since the late 90s. I've been a software engineer. I've been a technical director at agencies, and most recently I've been working in developer relations at Netlify, Dino. No longer at Dino, so I'm looking for my next job. So prepare for a 30-minute rundown of my LinkedIn profile. We don't have time for questions in the session today, but you can find me in lots of places on the internet, not really on Twitter these days, but elsewhere. I'm philhawksworth.dev. Also, I'm Phil Hawksworth at the event. You can always come and find me, tap me on the shoulder, and talk to me. I love to have conversations about doing things in the web. Okay, so let's get on with this. So in the beginning, and we're not going quite back to the beginning, the universe had come into existence, the earth had cooled, we were here already, but the web had been getting established for a few years. And in 1995, Brendan Eich created the first version of JavaScript. And he did that in 10 days. It took a little longer to complete. And I guess it's not really done, is it? I guess building things like JavaScript is like fashion. It's never really finished. And since that day, it's constantly been evolving and improving, and we're a big part of that. If we kind of step through some of the things that have happened in December 1995, Netscape and Sun Microsystems announced formally on the back of that 10 days of work from Brendan Eich, the JavaScript was something that would come into existence, and it was trademarked at that point by Sun Microsystems. And then in March 1996, Microsoft introduced JScript. Now, this was in reaction to the fact that JavaScript was starting to come into existence. So Microsoft reverse engineered that from what they found in the browser, and they created like an open implementation, which is called JScript at the time. Among the things that were in there were various proprietary things, like there was the Windows ActiveX object, which was really there to help Internet Explorer talk to Excel, something we're so very, very grateful for today. But this was kind of monumental at the time, and as things moved along, you know, in March '96, the first 1.0 official release of JavaScript came to the world through Netscape Navigator 2, and that's when the DOM arrived, and that's when this web page arrived, this home page. And yes, correct. Some feelings of nostalgia. If you like nostalgia for that, you'll love nostalgia for this. Oh, it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling seeing that animation, that loading animation that would load for a long, long, long time. But if that's nostalgia for you, then this will be a little taste of nostalgia as well. So this is a pattern that JavaScript developers at the time used to do all the time. I guess it's feature detection in a way. We'd be noting whether or not the browser would support document.layers, in which case it was Netscape, and we would do all of the Netscape code in there. And if not, it was IE, and we'd do all of the IE code in there. So this was kind of feature detection being used for browser detection, and already from these early days, we were forking the way we were building things, bad habits from the very, very outset. But of course, we know a little bit better than that these days. It was June 1997 before Netscape submits JavaScript to the ECMA International body, which is the European Computer Manufacturers Association, bit of a mouthful. But they, of course, are running the technical committees that operate lots of different things and govern lots of things. TC39, of course, you'll be familiar with, is the technical committee that governs ECMAScript, but there are other technical committees. I hadn't really given this much thought until I started kind of reviewing for this talk. There is, of course, the TC26 technical committee that deals with acoustics. They're a fun crowd, and they have conferences, I'm sure, where they say ECMAScript. They're a fun crowd. This is a long work. It takes a lot of effort to kind of drive these things forward. But some technical committees have completed their projects, I discovered. So TC49, paper sizes, another fun bunch at parties, and office devices, TC34. Both of these groups are marked as completing their tasks, which was a surprise to me when you consider what those things are and anyone who's actually tried to print something on paper in an office. Apparently that's what done looks like, but there you go. Moving forward through time, as we must do, March 99, Microsoft releases Internet Explorer 5, and that brought other types of proprietary technology within it. It also brought the XML HTTP request, which was the first practical way we ever had for JavaScript to make HTTP requests. And at the time, kind of doing that to retrieve XML and doing things dynamically, kind of for the first time in the browser. But it wasn't until April 2001 that the first JSON object, JSON message was sent. It's incredible to me that it was nearly 2 years between those two things. Now, fast forward a little bit further to June 2002, and then JSLint is introduced. And now, this is kind of the grandfather of all syntax checkers, and it starts to mark, for me at least, really the beginning of the ecosystem really starting to become enriched and starting to mature a little bit with tooling to help us build things and to try and do things in a much more responsible and repeatable and confident way. And so this kind of ecosystem enrichment is something that we'll keep on seeing as time goes by. September 2002 is when Mozilla released Firefox 1.0, which is kind of the precursor to Firefox, and it was the start really of browser diversity really starting to become much more popular, something that, of course, drove the web forward. And 2003, we saw Apple introduce Safari and WebKit, more of the same browser diversity starting to arrive. And then this was a big moment for anyone who was building things in the web when Gmail was released in its first beta version. I think, how long did that beta tag stay on Gmail? A very, very long time. But this felt like a real watershed moment. Did anyone get their hands on Gmail in the early days and they were moving, a few hands, moving across from other webmail applications? This felt different, and it was kind of remarkable by the way that it worked. It felt much more like an application because it was using asynchronous JavaScript and this new protocol or way of working with Ajax. And the term Ajax kind of got coined by Jesse James Garrett in 2005 in this white paper that he wrote, A New Approach to Web Applications. This was transformational. For me, this was something I pored over because I was a jobbing JavaScript developer at the time, and this really marked a maturity that was coming to JavaScript and capabilities that I just couldn't really imagine before then. So this is time maybe for a confession, which I'm conscious of at this particular conference. I adore JavaScript, but I like to use as little of it as possible, which seems a bit of a contradiction. Also, I should say, and ideally no less than is possible. I'm very cautious about pushing everything into JavaScript and just building big bundles of applications. I like to think about it with a lot more responsibility there, and I know that lots of people here are exactly the same. Now, at this time in 2005, I was all in on building a web application with JavaScript. I worked for VMware at the time, and we were building a web-based product which would allow people to manage all of their kind of configurations and their systems within the browser. It was a web console for doing that, and so the company called it Web Console, which is a mark of incredible branding that I've never seen the like of since. But I was working on this, and I was a JavaScript, I guess an Ajax developer then. I was starting to describe myself as. And this is when DOM manipulation was all I was caring about. I loved building things that was doing DOM manipulation. I was making every mistake imaginable. I was thinking I was inventing things. I was learning as I went. And one of the things I found myself doing all the time was I was writing this bit of code that we'll all recognize. And I started to think I was very, very clever because I want to build myself utility function little libraries. So I started wrapping things like this, and genius. Can you imagine what an innovator I was? But this felt like I was starting to build a set of libraries and utilities for myself. Then I kind of got a little bit more thrifty with the way I was naming things, so things got to be much more readable. And this feels like a precursor, or really, this is something that really was done so beautifully by jQuery, around March 2006, when John Resig pushed the first commit to jQuery. And this blew my mind. This was everything I wanted, everything I'd been trying to build myself, but doing a terrible job at, really, because this was just so beautifully designed. And I remember the delight of looking at the jQuery site for the first time and clicking this run button and seeing things move on the page with syntax that just seemed so logical and so readable, and it introduced so many conventions to me that I learned a lot from. And I love this from, I think John Resig wrote this, but certainly on the jQuery site in 2006, writing JavaScript should be fun. And by goodness, jQuery really made it fun. How many people have used jQuery here in the room? Okay, interesting. I'm curious as well, because it's been a while. It's still very, very popular. How many people have never used jQuery in the room? There's no shame in it. It's fine. Interesting, yeah. And it was everywhere. You couldn't avoid it, and it really made things fun. And after that, there was such an interactivity explosion. People were animating the crap out of everything, for good and for bad. It really did lots of work to kind of normalize these knobbly details across browsers that were so difficult. It normalized working across browsers, and it made animations trivial. Then this happened. Now, 2007, the iPhone was introduced, right? And this was a real shot in the arm for web developers because it really made use of web technologies in its applications. It's before, cool, that was loud. It was before, excuse me, it was before native applications were really a thing on the iPhone, and it really normalized using web technologies there. And this really expanded the reach of JavaScript because it was in so many people's pockets. It really increased the habitats that JavaScript would live in. But critically, there was no Flash support in Safari, which is something we'll talk about in a second. I love the fact there was so much speculation at the time about what an iPod would look like when a phone got added to it, and like Steve Jobs lent into this. I was pulled into this as well. I remember speculating about what a touchscreen would look like on an iPod, and people were kind of taking the UI devices that existed physically and maybe, yeah, they'll be able to lay them onto the device, so you'll be able to touch the touch wheel, not really thinking, of course, that was just using an old paradigm in a new way. And the way we interact with the UI now, it seems so obvious. We see it, we touch it, and it's kind of a physical manifestation. And it seems obvious now, but at the time, it was just a complete game changer. And it opened the doors to so many different types of devices. There's this huge proliferation of different devices, and the way we built things for the web just got even more complicated. Now, I mentioned this detail about Flash not being supported there on browsers, and there were huge debates about Flash versus HTML5 at the time. I even got asked at immigration at San Francisco airport once when arriving, when I mentioned I was there for a conference. He said, a web development conference. He said, what camp are you in, Flash or HTML5? I was, sorry, here's my passport, don't ask me any questions. But everyone was opinionated about this. And I got into arguments with developers about whether we should be building things with Flash or HTML5. They even became conference talks, our heated debates. And the reason we care about this is because we want to do the best for the user, right? And it was always difficult to have this debate, for me at least, that we should be using web standards or web technologies rather than Flash, because not everyone really cared about it. And the iPhone changed all of that for me, because all of a sudden, the senior stakeholders, they had these flashy new devices, which ironically had no Flash on them. And suddenly, stakeholders gave a shit. And so the argument kind of went away. It was won a little bit by default. And it's really kind of reminds me that awareness and empathy is so critical to be able to do good work on the web, as is play, right? So I could become very, very serious, but as JavaScript capabilities improved, so was the ability to play and make whimsical things. And we still need fun and creativity and whimsy and experimentation and nonsense, and I love all of that stuff. The designer I had debates with most often hated this. He hated the fact that Flash, which was an incredible playground for him, was being taken away, and then the capabilities of web technologies at the time felt like a real kind of shackle to him. And he drew this illustration for an article that he posted that really hit me, because he was like expressing the sentiment of erased HTML5 stripping the joy out of things. And when I worked with him on a particular project, he even said to me, "Please don't take my Flash away from me in this call." And I can't help noticing this character over here. It feels like he was illustrating me as the robot in here. But nonetheless, it felt like some of our playground was diminishing. But luckily, that's come back as the technology has increased and improved. Let's go a bit faster, because I'm very conscious of time. There's a lot to cover in 30 years. May 2008, Douglas Crockford published JavaScript, The Good Parts, giving this slide as a gift to people giving talks at JavaScript conferences forever. May 2008, Google released the Chrome browser. It wasn't until 2008 that came along. And then in 2009, CommonJS is created, originally called Server.js, and this was the first real specification for being able to modularize and share JavaScript code. It was transformational. Ryan Dahl then begins work on Node.js in 2009, somewhat empowered by CommonJS and also by V8, which is the C++ abstraction in the browser. And so Node.js kind of started being worked on in 2009. Again, like the reach and the habitats of JavaScript now reaching into the server as well as into the client, expanding the possibilities there. And I love the way I kind of dug out a conference talk or a meetup talk that Ryan went to demonstrate Node.js in the very, very early days, kind of announcing it. And I love, first of all, that it was a PHP meetup that he went to do this. It's like pretty baller, I think, doing that. But also, I don't know, if you had created Node.js, what kind of celebration and kind of hype would you bring to it? This is how Ryan introduced it.
I'm going to play with Node.js. You will watch me. You will be amused, and we will go on with our lives.
OK, fine. To the point. I wish I'd started the talk like that here myself. I will talk for a minute. You will be amused. We'll go on with our lives. We'll see how it goes. So that started in April. In 2009. In April 2009, Oracle acquire Sun Microsystems, and with it they acquire the trademark to JavaScript, which they hold to this day. I don't know if you realize that JavaScript is trademarked by Oracle, which means that conferences like this really can't be called JavaScript Heroes, because that would be a trademark infringement. We have to call it JSHeroes and then highlight the fact, annotate the fact that it means JavaScript. There is actually an open letter to Oracle saying, you've abandoned the trademark, it's time to give it back to the community so we can have JavaScript conferences, we can talk about it and use the name without fear. You can sign that if you wish. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about necessarily today. Let's keep moving along. June 2009, a lot happened in 2009, it occurs to me. The first commit to express.js was committed. Does anyone familiar with express.js? Yeah, I can, like fond memories of express.js, which really felt like a much easier way to build applications on the server with JavaScript. Had lots of kind of utilities for routing. It wasn't really an MVP framework, but it was kind of getting towards that, allowed us to do that so much more. And I loved building things with express.js. as did many, many people. And it was around that time, so later that year, Jeff Atwood coined the term Atwood's law. And I don't know if people know Atwood's law, but Atwood's law states that any application which can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. And wow, did that ever turn out to be true. There's a huge explosion of building things with JavaScript, whether it's the right thing to do or not, because it's a common tool that we had, whether we were working in the browser or on the server. It was incredibly exciting. January 2010, NPM version 1 is released, and here's another wonderful example of the ecosystem getting enriched so that we could have much more kind of portable and reusable code, which maybe we'll talk about briefly later on as well. October 2010, AngularJS and Backbone.js are released. More ecosystem enrichment happening with these frameworks and libraries. Rattling straight along to June 2011, Node.js is ported to Windows. This is huge when we think about the reach and the habitats where JavaScript could live. Now being possible in a Windows environment as well, open the door to so many people building things with Node.js. October 2012, this one blew my mind. Microsoft makes TypeScript 0.8 available for the public. In 2012, I thought it was far more recent than that. I had no idea. It shows how late I was to the party. But again, like the ecosystem just becoming enriched more and more, as has been happening just constantly since JavaScript's inception. May 2013, Facebook releases React, more ecosystem enrichment. July 2013, Gulp is released. Anyone remember Gulp? Yeah. Oh, that was an interesting set of noises around the room. Gulp, this tool for kind of building our web applications, was another example of ecosystem enrichment. But there were so many tools that kind of burst onto the scene there. I remember a talk that I gave around that time talking about Gulp and other package building tools like Gulp, Grunt, Brunch, and I speculated about Belch, Burp, Cough, and Sneeze arriving soon, labeling this area, the kind of hipster tax area, which is like the cost you pay for embracing technologies as and when they burst onto the scene. Really, I should reframe this now, not as the hipster tax. I guess this is more the hipster tariff, because a tariff is just a tax that you pass along to the consumer, and that's exactly what's happening there. Very often, we use these tools early, and the performance hits or some of the other kind of costs are passed along to the user, particularly when those tools are either over-engineered, as they often are, or under-engineered, as they often are. So some caution, I think, was always kind of important there. Anyway, enough preaching from me. February 2014, Vue.js is released, and I'm a big, yes, the two of us are big fans of Vue.js. I'm just a huge fan of Evanew's kind of technical taste, and technical taste seems to be a phrase that, I don't know, seems a bit cliched in this time, but I think it's critically important. Ecosystem being enriched once again. 2014, Amazon announces AWS Lambda. Now, this is kind of powered by Node, so kind of building on the building blocks that we've had already. A huge step forward in the reach of JavaScript and the habitats where it can exist. And it kind of is the real birth of serverless as an architecture. And I've come unstuck using the term serverless before, because whenever you talk about serverless, or certainly in the past, there's always be someone saying, I think you'll find there's a server somewhere. And yes, there is. And if I can just reflect on another slide I once had, I used to kind of liken it to wireless. Wireless charging is a thing, and we can all enjoy wireless charging. But I think you'll find. And of course, that's not part of your problem space. You don't need to worry about the wire, even if this wire. What is this? Is this a wireless charger? I don't know how to parse that. But regardless, serverless architectures meant that we could just write code, which is really, really empowering. It functions as a service, I felt, really unlocked the doors to doing all kinds of wonderful things with web technologies. Again, maybe something we'll just reflect on a tiny bit later on. But we need to get back to our timeline. July 2015, ECMAScript 6 is released, and that brought things like fetch, and it brought things like ESM native module systems, so we could have imports and exports, again, increasing the portability of our code, evolving and improving the landscape for us all. Now, then, Asa Korchilou removed left pad from NPM. A few intakes of breath around the room. You know, this was an inadvertent like supply chain attack that affected millions and millions of people by a simple package that was inherited by so many things in NPM being compromised and then just infiltrating so many projects around the world. And maybe that was the time that we started thinking about what code are we shipping. Maybe it gave us pause for thought about what code we're inheriting and what we're publishing. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know for sure. But it was a thing that happened. April 2016, Microsoft released VS Code version 1. This was a bit of a game changer. You know, after people who'd maybe been skeptical about using Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, VS Code was a big thing in 2016. And I would not use it because I'm Sublime Text. Yes, Sublime Text. I was Sublime Text until I die, and before then I was TextMate before I die. Before then I was Dreamweaver until I die. Before then I was HomeSite. Yes, thank you. My people. HomeSite before I died. Before that was Emacs before I died. Emacs was the pinnacle because you knew the people who made that cared about the logo. Still don't know what that is, but that's okay. These days, I guess I'm VS Code until I die, except I'm sometimes cursor till I die. I'm cursor for the time being. Let's call it that. But this is exciting because tools are getting much more comprehensive and much more capable, and the tools are evolving with the technology. It's a really exciting time throughout this period for us to be doing what we're doing. Okay, I must crack on. Time is against us. 2016, Angular was released, or was it Angular 2? Naming is hard. And Next.js version 1 was released in October 2016 as well. You know, more ecosystem enrichment, more tools, like just bursting forth. It felt like some things were moving so quickly with all of these things arriving. At the same time, some things move very, very slowly. Talked about TC39 earlier on. Standards work is really hard, and I take my hat off to anyone who works in standards. It's incredibly important and valuable work, and it requires such patience. In 2017, for instance, the initial commit to temporal API was proposed. That first proposal was created, and temporal, if it's something you haven't come across, is intended as a replacement for the date object. I don't know why Brendan Knight didn't get it right first time in those 10 days of furious typing, but certainly this will make date manipulation in JavaScript so much easier. You know, I think he actually described it as working with time and dates in JavaScript can be a massive pain in the arse. Again, I don't know if that's a real quote, but he surely must have said that. But given that was proposed in 2017, it wasn't until 2021 that the proposal was approved for inclusion in the ECMAScript standard. Currently, we're getting good support for that now, just starting to land in browsers. Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Opera all have this now, as does Dino and Node.js, so it's starting to propagate across the ecosystem. Must be quick. Prettier was released in April 2017, more tooling. Facebook launches Yarn in 2017. My goodness, okay, another fan for Yarn, woohoo! So much has happened along the way here. 2017, Cloudflare launches Workers, allowing JavaScript to now run, you know, in a serverless environment at the edge of the CDN as well, further increasing the kind of the reach and habitats where JavaScript can exist. Ryan Dahl teases a new project in June 2018 to undo some of the things that he regrets about Node.js. And the debate about how he came up with the name Dino for that project is still up for debate, but I have my own theories. And then in May 2020, JavaScript made it into space. This is wild to me that, you know, we're talking about the reach and the habitats where JavaScript can exist. Who knew that it would be there? I think it's just wildly cool that the touchscreen consoles in that craft were Chromium, and they ran with JavaScript. There's still 6 years that I'd love to talk about, but I have to kind of call time on this. You know, maybe I'll just call out that 2020 Dino 1 was released, and then 4 years later Dino 2 was released in October. Coincidentally, I joined Dino then in that month, and I don't know. Correlation is not causation. However, since I mentioned that I am looking for a new job, it seems like this chart is important. Was it because of Dino 2, or was it for other reasons? I'll let you decide. So, As we're kind of, I'm more or less out of time, it's worth calling out that we're not done, right? You know, we haven't quite reached this stage yet. We've got more work to do. And along the way for JavaScript, you know, things have evolved and improved. The ecosystem has been enriched, and the reach and the habitats where JavaScript can exist have just expanded. And that's happened because of you, right? You know, we're constantly building with JavaScript, we're innovating, we're calling for it to be more and more powerful, and we're showing that it can be. And that's the work that we all do together to kind of improve those things. I asked earlier on about why we care and talked about kind of empathy and awareness, but the important thing is that we come to events like this because we do. We kind of care about doing the right job. And I'm cautious about this particular slide, so I've just got a couple of moments left before I wrap up. But you know, I mentioned about serverless functions gives the ability to just write code. But what about the future? Where are we going? You know, are we still writing code? Are we still making code? Do we just make the things? Alex kind of called out something that might feel like our next frontier, which is artificial intelligence. And I'm really nervous about talking about this at events like this where we really care about the craft of making things for the web. I've been so skeptical about artificial intelligence for such a long time. It's very problematic in lots of ways, but it's hugely important. It's undeniably here. I worry about artificial intelligence if it isn't backed up by actual intelligence, by your intelligence. And I'm curious about what happens if we don't engage with it. What happens if we say, I'm not going to touch it, that's not for me, I don't believe in it. Will the things that we make as a you know, in the world for the web, will they get better or will they get worse? Will it be used properly or not? And you know, I'm struck to think that we're an incredibly informed crowd, you know, people at events like this. We're very, very opinionated, and it's that opinionation that's so important at times like this. I kind of don't want to waste that insight and those opinions by not engaging at all. So I'm kind of tentatively starting to do that. I'm notoriously slow at adopting abstractions and tools, even to the extent that I was cautious about using Sass. I was like, I know how to write CSS. I'm not having a tool write it for me. And I got kind of called out, not directly, but in this talk in 2013 by Chris Coyer, who kind of talked about the abstractometer, and he kind of mentioned this about Sass.
Really like CSS, and they like authoring in CSS. They're already this far up the abstraction layer, and they're like, this far and no farther.
I won't play the whole clip, but he was ultimately saying people are happy to use abstractions, but not for some tools. It kind of influenced my thinking, and I'm starting to think a little bit that AI resembles that to me. AI is not Sass, and I'm conceding that straight away. But I am starting to think a little bit about how I can use it as an abstraction. I'm almost done, but this talk, if you're thinking about this at all and uncomfortable with it, this is a great talk that I got to see by Matt Pocock, who talked about how the software fundamentals and the process of building software are actually more important now than ever, because it's the way that we communicate with people and engineers on our teams and each other, that those practices are going to be even more important in this new world. It feels like a bit of an abstraction for me. Okay, I'm kind of done. We own JavaScript between us, despite the fact that there might be a trademark around it. We drive it forward through the work we do, the standards work we do, the discussions, the events like this. We can use it very responsibly, as we should, and we can use it really whimsically, as we should. It's joyous. You'll see examples of that later today as well. Between us, we can use it to build incredible things, and I hope we continue to do that. If you wanted to get into more of the things that I've referenced there's a blog post that lists a load of these things on the history of JavaScript. You can, of course, sign that open letter to Oracle to release that trademark if you wished, and you can find me on Blue Sky. All of the links, of course, will be in the slides that are online now. So thank you so much for your time, your attention. I hope you have a wonderful conference. Thanks so much.